Hey guys, I'm Richard Fitzgerald. This is Dubai Works, where we interview the business leaders making a difference in this great city.
That business with scale mobility was very interesting to me.
I like building something that has legacy.
Good afternoon, or good morning, good evening, like the Truman Show, whatever time you're listening to this show or this podcast. This is another week of Dubai Works, and this week I'm very happy to be joined by a friend, Maha. Maha is the chief, Maha Gaber, Maha Abouelenein, if I'm pronouncing it right.
Maha Abouelenein, that's pretty good.
Oh, you're much better. I
Okay.
really need to work on my phonetics in
Your
Arabic.
Your Arabic is great. Trust me.
So embarrassed. Okay. Anyway, you are now the Chief Value Officer for Gary Vaynerchuk and EVP of Business Development for Vaynerchuk. That is, you're responsible for PR and communications for the Gary Vaynerchuk brand, as well as strategic high-level development, relationships, and business development across Vaynerchuk and Gary Vaynerchuk. You're at the moment we're dialing in. You're calling from the US, but you're based between the UAE and the USA, and as I know, and as people who know you as well, you've had an illustrious career, mainly in this region, working with brands like Netflix, Careem, which is now Uber, Deezer, and you were also served as the head of global communications and public policy for Google MENA. So a lot there, and that's probably just touching the surface. Welcome, and thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me today.
So
I miss Dubai. I'll be back soon.
Yeah, you got out just before. You were one of the last people out, I think, in March.
March 16th.
Yeah. Where are you now? You're in Minnesota?
I'm in Minnesota. So I was born and raised here in Minnesota. And right when everything started happening during the pandemic, I'm like, I really want to be with my family during this time. And so my sister lives here. So I'm in quarantine with my family in Minnesota, right outside of Minneapolis.
Okay. So where can we start? What have the last few months been like?
Well, it's been interesting. I mean, first of all, we've learned to pivot in ways we didn't know we were capable of, like, right? Understanding like how to work remotely, putting together your home work from home routine. And we learned that we're super productive. We learned how to communicate. I was having a call yesterday with some colleagues at Vayner, and we were saying that we've met more people virtually through working on Zoom and Hangouts than we probably would have been through the halls of the office, because we're working with LA and Singapore and London, and even in New York, Vayner Media has several different offices. So, Long Island City and stuff like that, and Hudson Yards. So we're able to kind of communicate and collaborate more. So I think it's taught us the value of the internet. It's taught us the value of, communicating through different platforms and how we can just adopt our lifestyles, have birthdays and graduations and working and meetings and really using, the internet to connect in ways that we didn't think were possible besides social media. And I think now we're seeing like the value proposition of Zoom through business and how intimate it is and how personal it can be. And so that's been kind of the big thing for me, is just kind of adapting to this, the way of working, I think, remotely, and how do you network through online, and how do you do business development through online. So it's just learning to use new muscles that we didn't really know that we had. And to be honest with you, I'm like super grateful. Everyone's healthy, and everyone's, in my family at least, is doing well. And we really need to focus on people first. Like, how are you doing? How are you coping being under quarantine? And thinking about the human side of business first before we talk about the business results and how we're performing. We have to make sure we feel safe and we feel healthy. And so it's been an interesting time, and I'm really grateful for it, to be honest with you. I think it's taught us a lot about ourselves and a lot about each other, and really what really matters when it comes down to it.
Yeah, you sound very positive after everything, which is good. I think I think you're right. People have reflected and people have made the most out of it. But you must have gone straight into quarantine there, and then of course all the social and justice issues came up, especially in the state that you're in. Outside of work for a moment, what has that been like? We've seen it covered in the media here, But what was it?
Yeah.
What's the mood or the atmosphere like in the US for the last month or so?
Change is going to happen. It's not something we're just going to talk about anymore. Like, there's a before George Floyd and after George Floyd. And I think it was a sea change moment that people woke up, everybody woke up. And now it's like, we have more information now. What are we going to do with it? And now that we have this information, like, we live in the information age. For us to ignore the information that's available to us is on us to make that change happen. So I think it's been emotional. Like, my Minneapolis looked reminiscent of scenes from Cairo. It's like protests and tear gas. The first couple of days were quite scary. Like, businesses were looted and fires were taking place and there was a lot of violence. And then the protesters were being peaceful and trying to really express their right to protest. That's a human right that everybody has. And so I think now the situation in Minneapolis is not it's not as violent or as scary as it was before. I mean, now they're looking at policy change. They're looking at how they can make sure that they look at the policies of the police. Obviously, everybody's wants them to be accountable for what happened, but it was murder in broad daylight. Everybody saw it. You couldn't help but be moved by the situation, and then make you think inwards about all the things that you are saying or doing that you don't know have an impact on other people, and how Black Lives Matter is because they're their lives that are in danger. And what are we doing to make sure that we are, being more inclusive in terms of all people at the office and at work and in interactions. And, you seek what you find, like what you're looking for. So what are you looking for? Are you looking to extend a hand? Are you looking for more equity? And so really just, for me, I've been learning so much about it and reading up and listening to audiobooks and starting to follow voices I didn't used to follow before. I need to educate myself. And I believe that every company had that conversation in their office. Like, what are we doing to include more people, and how can we make sure we're not part of the problem, and that we're extending our hand to really elevate ourselves as well.
Yeah, we'll talk later about communications in crisis, and I think we could talk at length on this topic about how brands reacted. But from a kind of cultural diversity in the workplace point of view, this seems to be like racial diversity, but in the past we've had movements like the Me Too movement, which was a lot about gender and different things like that. Do you think, in the US and in your role, which is, at C-suite level at one of the leading digital and communications businesses in the world, do you think that that's a sign that we've moved on? Would that role have been available to you or someone in your position 10 years ago? And how do you think that's related to the Black Lives Matter movement as well in terms of action?
For my role at Vayner?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest with you, I'm Gary is one who's inclusive of all races and people. Like, I am the first Arab American to be put in this position. And really creating the role of a chief value officer was something that I really believed in, because my whole life and DNA has been about creating value for other people. Like, what's the value equation? It's not what's valuable to me, it's what's invaluable to you. And like, creating value through relationships, through press, through business, anything I can do to add value to the organization. And it wasn't, we are hiring her because she's Egyptian. It was, we are hiring her because she has skills and adds value to our organization, and is really, had a career that has experiences that can add value to the company. And that's why I believe, I'm in this position today. I think one of the reasons that, one of the big, I think, outcomes of the Black Lives Matter, movement today, which is different than other issues that have happened before, is it's caused everyone to think about, how are we making sure we have the right representation? How are we doing on equity? What conversations should we be having as a business? How does this fit our values? How do we make sure we're living our values? I think, as a brand and as a company who's thinking about their communications when it comes to times like this, like, it's not enough to have a generic statement. You really need to think about what are the actions that you will be living every day, and not just in terms of communicating internally to your employees and like making sure that you have the right people hired at the company, but making sure that your policies like vendors and suppliers and what businesses are you supporting and how are you awarding those contracts to other vendors or partners, and looking at the holistic relationship that you have with internal and external partners.
What do you think of the Middle East on these topics? Do you think the issue is as prevalent as it is in the US in your experience? And yeah,
definitely,
it is.
Definitely. It's universal. It's universal. Like even, and I could say this because I'm Egyptian American, and like even for me to be, a minority amongst people who are not Muslims in the United States, you have to educate people, and you have to have the conversations like, what is Ramadan, and what do, not all Muslims are terrorists, like, having those conversations, even in the Middle East, around people who don't look like you, or people who don't act like you. And, how are you extending a hand to make sure you're learning first, listening first, and leaning into having conversations about race, even in the Arab world, which I think it matters just as much as it does in the US or in Europe or any other country around the world.
If we were talking about gender, I would agree, because we can look across, even for this podcast, it's harder to find C-suite level females as it is males. However, from a diversity point of view, if you compare the US or even the UK and Ireland, where I'm from, it's by default Dubai is more diverse. I'm not, I'm not sure if it's the same in Egypt or in other countries, but in that sense, the portfolio of staff members is going to be more diverse than in the US. But I'm just wondering, is it because are people open enough to talk about these topics here as they are and debate about them in the US? And will we see change as well, do you think?
I think even in the region, especially like as a female founder of a business, like back in 2000, when I was working at, starting up like Weber Shandwick and working in Egypt, like there was only one other woman that was head of an ad agency. Like the conversation around having a female founder in the Middle East is more common today than it was 5 years ago even. So I think it's just exposure to talent and exposure for women to feel like there's role models and mentors out there so they can be a female founder. Like they have to see, I can do that by seeing somebody else do it. And so it's just a matter of like, the more female founders we have in leadership, then the more people are going to think, oh, I can start a company too because she did it, So it's the same thing for any ethnic, race or any, group of people that aren't being represented. So making sure that we are making room for them by setting an example. And so a lot of it is like, where are the mentors? Where are the mentors that can help be as an example for people, or help coach them, or help give them inspiration to do what they think they're capable of doing, but just showing them the way.
So I want to ask how VaynerMedia do this, because if the topics that we're talking about might raise their hats in different guises in this region. So it might be to do with nationality and pay grades and things like that, as opposed to which is similar to what's been discussed in the US as well, to a degree. But, in VaynerMedia, as you mentioned, it seems to be very diverse. And, I spent time in the offices as well, as you facilitated in the past. But a role that you have is similar to the Chief Heart Officer at VaynerMedia, which was a role that was created. And how does that role and the types of people that are in those positions encourage, not just from a leadership point of view, but encourage diversification and raise these issues from the ground up?
Well, I don't know specifics on so the Chief Heart Officer, Claude, she's really responsible for like the culture and the heart of the organization. So, the people, the performance team, and the HR role falls under her. And so they have programs that they do to, elevate diversity and unbiased, unconscious bias training. Like there's a whole group of things and activities that the company takes place. I wouldn't be able to speak on the details, except for I know they have, community resource groups, which I'm active in now, just helping, elevate the conversation, develop programs, making sure it's more inclusive. So they, have different, resource groups that talk about all the activities, and it's really widely represented in the company from leadership down to make sure that everyone's engaged in that. I think, my role on the chief value officer side has more to do with creating opportunities for Gary's brand, creating opportunities for communications, relationships, building sort of on the value equation that leads to business development. And so it's a very different role from what Claude does versus what I do. I also think that, this is a time where everyone is looking inward to figure out what is the right recipe for them to be successful in having a long-term program in place. So one of the things that, I talked about a little bit on my podcast last week was internal communications. What are the internal communications infrastructures that companies have in place to make sure that they're promoting the values within the organization, regardless if they're a huge company or a small company. There's a lot of importance in making sure that your employees who are your brand ambassadors feel they know where the company stands and what they're doing. So just a different time to elevate your internal comms game as well as your external one.
Interesting. That's a nice segue. We'll go into the communication side, but I think a takeout from that is that even a company with, 1,000 employees can have programs in place, which, people are accountable for. I think that's interesting on diversity, which companies here maybe can learn from, including us. On the communication side of things, when work from home kicked off, you shared with me a document which I shared around to our team, which was all about communicating in this environment. And I know that through Digital and Savvy, you offer a lot of kind of material and courses on that. On crisis management particularly, how do you think companies have dealt with coronavirus?
Well, it's interesting. I think the brands who did well and who waved the storm found a way to be useful during this time. So you can't be tone deaf in talking about what's important to you. You have to think about what's important to your customer. So pivoting your business strategies and messages from selling to safety, and making sure that a brand to be useful, they may have to pivot and do other things. So you saw the Gap was making scrubs, and Louis Vuitton was switching their perfume lines to making hand sanitizer. Find a way to be useful. This is a pandemic. These things happen once every 100 years. Or so. I hope not ever, again for a long time, but your brand has to behave given the environment that's around us. And so I think the brands that did really well communicated with empathy. They communicated with authenticity. They communicated in a way that was useful for the brand, where it didn't feel self-serving. Nobody wants, a car company to be pushing their sales when you can't get your job and you can't go to work and you can't make your day-to-day food payment. So refinancing was a good message for them. We're going to get you through the tough times. Just making sure that what you were talking about is appropriate in a crisis, to make sure that you're not tone deaf to what the audience is experiencing and living through day to day.
Is it a fine line? Sometimes people put something out and it's really well received, and then sometimes someone might put the same message out. How from a communications strategy point of view, do you gauge that sentiment? Do you read the room in this sort of very noisy room that we're all in?
Gary talks about this all the time. The context is everything. You have to have the right context for your message, making sure that you understand your audience really well. So how do you do that? A lot of people think communications is about you putting something out. The big step about communications is listening first. Listening to the audience, reading the room, looking up the hashtags, understanding sentiment, understanding what people care about, listening first. Before you start having a conversation, you need to listen to see what the conversation's about, and then find out where your voice belongs in that conversation. I think one of the things that a lot of companies are quick to do is they want to quickly like over communicate or overreact because they feel the need to do something. Well, you might do something that's not the right step for you. So being mindful, be thoughtful about what you want to say. Is it purpose driven? Does it lean into your values? Is it consistent with how you normally communicate? Is what you're saying consistently externally is what you tell your employees internally? Just making sure like you're just really looking at communications. Like having good communication skills now more than ever is one of the most important things you need to focus on. How do you communicate online? How do you communicate through your personal brand? How do you communicate as a company? And how do you communicate internally? Like there's no longer a nice to have that someone in the company will be in charge of communications. Communications is everybody's business.
What do you think of statements from companies during crisis that they try and be empathetic and they try and come out with something that hits the tone right, and then it drags up skeletons in the closet? For example, they might say, this is what we believe, Black Lives Matter, we support it, and then some staff say, well, you don't, and here's 10 years of bad treatment. Or it'll
come out. Transparency, it'll come out. Like that's why you have to be very careful what you say, because it'll come out. Like if a company is a hero brand but not a hero company, the employees will speak up. I think that's clear. Yeah, I mean it's not something that you can kind of hide anything under the rug. Like everyone's filming everything now, so like anything that if a company is not being consistent, they'll call it out. Customers will call it out.
So people let go, made redundancies during this period all over the world. Some of them, like Uber did in the US and Careem did here, and how they responded was very well received. Do you think that was a masterclass in leadership or a masterclass in communications, or both?
It was a masterclass in empathy.
Okay.
To be honest with you, like how to let go of people during a time of crisis and do it with dignity, like making sure you stand them up to have, a financial package, that you make sure that you are taking care of them, you're showing your appreciations, you let them go with dignity, you plan with them their exits. Like, I mean, I don't know specifically, I just saw some people on LinkedIn that I know that were working there that left, but like, it was classy the way that Careem did it, in a way that made people feel like they're going to go onward and do other things. And Careem was a big part of their career and was making sure that they were always part of that family.
I agree. And it's been great. You can feel the kind of community and the spirit within that organization from the outside here. So, and I know you worked closely with them, so it seems really well managed. However, in the US, there's this, kind of uprising on, gig workers rising and, against sort of tech and taxes and that sort of, there's new regulation in California. That doesn't seem to have come up in the surface during this time in this region. Why do you think it's not related, or how do you think these things are different?
Wait, I'm not familiar with that. Can you give me a background? Sorry.
It's just that, I guess the kind of gig economy, has a lot of people who aren't full employees, and there's new regulation coming in place in the US, but it doesn't seem to be an issue over here. It doesn't seem to be as in the forefront. Is it that it's communicated differently?
Yeah, like I haven't seen it splash here in Minnesota, in my market, and I'm actually a big consumer of news, so I haven't seen much of it. But I don't know, like especially in the UAE, platforms like Careem, I find them diversifying. Like now they're focusing on food delivery or helping the Careem Now, like push that. Like, that's a good example of using your business to focus on what people want the most. Like people aren't using Careem to get around in cars, but they are using the app to get their food delivered to them, and how you can kind of be more useful and share the services that mean the most to them. The gig economy was never going to go away. I think it's just going to continue. It's going through a version of adaptation to what's happening in the market. Food delivery, cloud kitchens are huge right now, and they're going to continue to grow. Like all of the new businesses that emerged based from the coronavirus pandemic, like, curbside delivery, companies having to create apps to order things and pick up, and like they didn't have that before. E-commerce, Vayner does a ton of work in this space right now. Like, and how do you make sure that you have, omni-channel, which means you're present on different channels and that you're really actively, on websites, and you have application and you have in-store. How do you take a business or a brand like in the UAE, like a Shalhoub, which is like huge, and how do you make sure that you have all of those brands and products available that you can purchase with the click of your phone? We saw Noon in the UAE, launched food delivery, during the pandemic, and
yeah.
what's that?
It's called Now, yeah.
Now, yeah. So it's like the Noon Daily or something like that. Anyways, you can get your daily groceries, just pivoting in a way that just what do customers care about the most? They care about getting food delivered, medicine delivered, that type of thing, and creating that demand around, the products that people need. I've seen surges in Saudi, all the customers, they have so many orders that everyone wants things delivered to their house. And it was very common in the region to do food delivery for the last 20 years. They've been doing food delivery in McDonald's in Egypt and stuff. And now it's last mile logistics, supply chain. How do you really build your business to make sure that you're innovating in the ways that customers really need?
The kind of branding side of things. What is personal branding? What's your definition?
Well, people think that personal branding is about self-promotion. It's actually about leadership, right? If you have an account online, you're a personal brand, right? Everything you say is a message about yourself, something you're passionate about, so thinking about your personal brand is something that I'd love everyone to think twice about. What kind of content are you passionate about sharing? What kind of topics do you think you can talk about endlessly and be passionate about and not get sick of talking about? What is the right way for you to think about your personal brand? Do you enjoy writing, and so you want to write blogs? Do you enjoy voice? You want to do a podcast? Do you enjoy videos, and so you want to create something on YouTube or something on Instagram that's just more your, straight to camera? It doesn't have to be overproduced and well done. In fact, we're seeing in the news industry today, everyone's doing their broadcasts from their home in their kitchen. Kids are coming in the scenes. Dogs are walking on the set. I don't know if you saw Serena Williams did something live with her husband, and she had these shows she does on Saturdays, and all of a sudden you can hear the pitter patter of the dog coming into the room, and then the dog sat where you couldn't see him on the camera, and then the dog got out. It was just it's just more authentic. It's how we live. We get to see, people in their homes without makeup and hair, and just the real deal. And so I think that's the thing about the personal brand that's, exciting to see evolve, especially during times of COVID, and how people are thinking about what stories they want to tell, how do they want to tell them, and using the internet to really build their brands. If you're passionate about yoga or photography or cooking, or you're really into, whatever, you're, pottery making, the things that you're passionate about and you want your brand to be known for are things that people should lead into and really create content around that.
So on your personal brand and your company, Digital and Savvy, what choices have you made? You mentioned the podcast, because obviously there's a limited time in the day, there's limited things that we can do. What choices have you made from medium point of view and from content point of view? What have you decided that's important?
So Digital Savvy is not a company, it's a platform. So when I actually was thinking about my personal brand, I'm what do I want to talk about outside? What is the one thing that I love so much? It's communications. And my mission in life is to help people communicate better. So I wanted to create a platform, something where I can put out content. It's going to be a blog. Is it going to be a podcast? And so I really looked at myself. I'm I don't really like doing a lot of things on camera. I don't really want to have to worry about a video and production and music and lights and, filming and memory cards. And I tried filming and I would always mess it up. So I really love voice. It's frictionless. I can do it anywhere, anytime. I'm a huge listener of podcasts. So I decided that I would build my personal brand around my podcast and communications, for writing articles, and because I love to write, and doing a podcast. So that's what fit for me. It might be something else for somebody else, they only want to do videos. So really thinking about what is it that makes you feel comfortable, and then do that.
Yeah. So let's talk about, related to this, Gary Vaynerchuk. So we mentioned at the start your role there. How good is Gary at personal branding? You've worked with many famous people on the speaking circuit, and also in leadership figures, and even your first job was with one of the leading Najib Suarez, is that?
And Naguib
Yeah,
Sawiris.
so you've worked with I know
Most powerful people.
most powerful people, many people.
Yeah, I mean, like Gary is a good storyteller. Like he's very authentic. He has the camera on all the time. He's not a different person on the camera, behind the camera. He just is always on. So that level of transparency all the time gives you unlimited freedom. Like it's liberating for him to have the, documenting everything that's happening. He's not creating content. He's not putting on a show. He's actually just documenting his life as a CEO. What does he do? How does he advise people? How does he talk to entrepreneurs? So his personal brand is basically based on him and his style, and he's unapologetic about any of it. So like if his hair's sticking up or if his shirt's sticking out, like he just wants to be his authentic self. And that's what makes him such a powerful brand, is people really feel that they know him and his style and his message. And, he's very consistent Gary's really like, it's funny for me I've been working with him for a couple of years now, but like he has a video, like he'll show us from like, I don't know, 10 years ago. He's saying the same thing he says today. Like, it's like, wow, you were that consistent that long ago. Or like he predicted, Joe Rogan would be getting a podcast deal for $100 million like last year. Like, it's like weird, like consistent of how he sees things and how he predicts things. He's not Nostradamus, like he's not sitting in front of a crystal ball, but he just like understands patterns. He has really good pattern recognition. He knows where audience attention is going. Like he's been pushing TikTok long before anybody knew what TikTok was, right?
Yeah.
And now it's such explosive growth. Like every time he talked to all of us, like, where's your TikTok channel? Are you guys on TikTok? He talked to all these youth. Are you on TikTok? Get on TikTok. And like now TikTok is having a huge moment. And a lot of people who are like, I don't dance. I don't want to be on TikTok dancing. Gary's not on TikTok dancing.
No, he did that. Yeah. What did he do? Tell us recently on TikTok.
Oh, he did this unbelievable. For 12 hours, he was live on TikTok.
Is that possible? Yeah.
Yeah, for him it was possible.
Wow.
Like he raised $2.3 million for food charities that go to people who are, in need during COVID, because a lot of families are, kids get their meals through schools, and so No Kid Hungry and Meals on Wheels, and there was like 4 different charities that they were benefiting to make sure that they could, put money into these charities and organizations to feed more families. And so, yeah, $2.3 million he raised. Like, there's a really cool thing that TikTok has where like you're doing a live and then they'll put like a little treasure chest and you click it during, like, they open it every hour and it's like free money. And so it's like coins drop and you get to raise money for a charity. So, and he had different celebrities come in and out, and TikTokers and just regular people who wanted to ask questions to Gary about entrepreneurship. And so it's been super fun to see how he's adapting also his brand during this time to like do more things that are live. He has a morning show every day now that he didn't have before. Wow. So it's like also innovating on his brand. He does this thing called Tea with Gary V. And so every morning for an hour or two, he'll spend time taking calls from entrepreneurs and asking questions and have a cup of tea with him in the morning. And it's pretty fun.
Wow. So I think like on personal branding and giving value, there seems to be an overlap, because personal branding in a way is selfless. You're not charging for a lot of the content you're putting out there. So some of the value that you invest in your personal brand, and also Gary, you can't measure it. You can't measure that charitable donation in many levels. But on the other side, you can measure some of it. So the business model around personal branding, whether it's conferences and speaking and books and things like that, is that something that he's kind of innovated in as well?
Yeah, I mean, he obviously has a business that helps people build their personal brands, like create content, create TV shows, helping with book deals, booking you for speaking gigs, helping create all the content that you want. Like, don't create the same piece of content on TikTok that obviously you put on LinkedIn. Like, building your personal brand and your expertise in your area is a method of business development, right? it helps create top of the funnel. So if you're more aware of your expertise in your area, you're going to pull more media. And that's why my role at VaynerMedia is value and business development. I do both together.
Yeah.
So like we create value for Gary's brand, for the company, for the business, so people know that we are experts in e-commerce, we're experts in TikTok. We can help do creative and media for your brands on the digital and creative side of marketing. And once you create your thought leadership and your awareness that, oh, this is a company that understands how to do esports and gaming, then from business development standpoint, people know you're the company that can come to do that piece of business or to help grow revenue for them in that area. So it's a yin and the yang, but it's both. It's that's the, I think of things like kind of all things revenue, like creating press. It generates revenue for your business because it increases your visibility, it increases your shareholder value, it increases your reputation, it brings awareness to your business and brand. So doing PR and communications is a pivotal part of your business development strategy. It also helps with retaining talent. It helps with recruiting talent. It helps with understanding if you want to build your personal brand because you want to raise money and profile of investors, your profile for investors. Like building your personal brand is not just about, hey, I'm an expert, look at me, I know some stuff. No, there's a business purpose behind it. There's a business reason you create your personal brand. It's because you have an expertise in something or you're passionate about something and you want to share it with the world. And the platform to do that is social media. It could be through speeches in person. It could be online through workshops. It could be many ways. Your personal brand is not just you putting posts on Instagram. It could be other things that you do online and offline to help create that brand in a personal way.
What would your advice be to people now for the rest of the year around communications, whether it's personal branding or company PR strategy? Do you think they should
Learn.
Say?
You got to learn. You have to learn how to be a better communicator. You have to learn how to use LinkedIn for business development, how to use LinkedIn to communicate to your audiences, how to use LinkedIn for, driving business and getting customers, how to use Twitter. What are the best way to use Twitter for your business and making sure that if you're not on Twitter, well, what's the way I should be doing it? Like, how do you use the social media platforms, the tools that are available for free? Nobody pays for LinkedIn. Nobody pays for Instagram. Nobody pays for Facebook or Twitter or TikTok. How do you use those platforms that audiences are on to leverage your business, to build your brand? So that's the first thing, is you got to learn how to communicate on social media. Second thing is like public speaking and knowing how to write are really, really important. So like being able to communicate verbally, understanding what's the best way to present your ideas. If you need to do a presentation at work, if you need to get your managers, let them see the work that you've been doing and how to manage up and share your ideas. If you want to understand how to, not only communicate in terms of speaking and presenting, but writing. Like writing copy is one of the most important skills you need to have. Like, how do you write a caption in a few characters? How do you make sure that the copy pulls the attention of the reader? What are you doing to improve your writing skills? How are you thinking about the writing component of communications, not just the image or the video or the post that you're putting up? A lot of free tools are online. There's a lot of ways to get online courses to learn how to communicate from all the different types of communications that are out there. So like lean into it. Like this is something that's here to stay. Communications is not something that you're just going to need to know how to do if you're in that job. Everybody at every level in every company or in any personal brand or private business will need to know how to be a contemporary communications, expert.
Interesting. So even in 2020, if I'm sitting here in Dubai and my business has slowed down and my personal branding, or I've lost my job, now is not too late to open a Twitter account or start a podcast.
It's never too late. This is from here to stay. Like a lot of people, and Gary talks a lot about this. Like the reason why a lot of celebrities are late to coming on social media is they don't want to have a small following to start with. Well, think about it for like a year from now. 2 years from now, you wish you would have started. Like if you don't have if you have 200 or 50 followers on Instagram. You're like, I have a very small audience. No one's going to look. How are you going to grow it? You're going to grow it by being consistent, by posting regularly. If you are worried about getting on TikTok because your videos might not be seen, there's so much organic growth on TikTok and on LinkedIn. So start now, start now. Because if you start now, 6 months, a year, 2 years from now, you'll have an audience and you'll have more traction. And you're going to wish 5 years from now that you would have started back in 2020 during the pandemic when you had time on your hands to figure out how to use these tools and you just didn't do it.
Wow. Okay. Right. Really good
Don't
note.
do it. Yeah. But it's just a good time to learn. Like it's a good time to figure things out that you were always curious about, but didn't have the time. So people aren't traveling for work. People have more time than they had. Don't spend all your free time watching Netflix and watching television. Read some books, listen to some audiobooks, take some free online courses, jump on some podcasts, expose yourself. If you're not sure where you want to go, expose yourself to lots of ideas and lots of different things, and then figure out what it is that you like.
Brilliant note to finish on, Maha. Thank you so much. And I think that last point will resonate on many levels to people. So thanks a lot. Thanks for your time, and good to see you so positive many miles away.
Yes, we will see you soon.
Come back to Dubai.
I will be back in September, inshallah.
Okay, inshallah. Perfect. Thanks a lot, Maha. Good to see you. Have a nice day.
Richard, you too.
Hey guys, I'm Richard Fitzgerald. This is Dubai Works, where we interview the business leaders making a difference in this great city.
That business with scalability was very interesting to me.
I like building something that has legacy.